Alright, so about a month ago I uploaded a Road to Total War Warhammer 3 video speculating on the pre-order race pack that will come with Total War Warhammer 3, but it had audio fuck-ups, and I didn't intend to upload it. I had actually caught the issue and went to delete it, but I guess I deleted one of the good recordings and uploaded that one instead, so I've finally deleted the video off my channel, and I'm uploading a second attempt here. So, just going to be speculating on the Total War Warhammer 3 race pack. So the first thing to say is, I don't think it's going to be a Norska situation. Norska was the pre-order race pack for Total War Warhammer 2, and if you bought it, then you got to also play Norska in Total War Warhammer 1. I don't think that's going to be the case again, because the Steam page states that the race pack is for Total War Warhammer 3 and not Total War Warhammer 2. On the off chance that Creative Assembly for some reason describe things differently than they logically would, if it is a playable race in Total War Warhammer 2, then it's almost certainly going to be Araby. And I say that because I know the Chaos Dwarfs are a popular one since Legend of Total War suggested them, but I'll talk about them in a second. But Cathay has proven that Creative Assembly does want to take a look at the non-playable human cultures in the Warhammer world from the tabletop. However, it's not going to be Araby, because it's not going to be a Total War Warhammer 2 race. It's going to be a Warhammer 3 race. So with that in mind, there's really three ones left from the tabletop, three army books left from the tabletop that have not been done. And those are Ogre Kingdoms, Chaos Dwarfs, Dogs of War. And I can guarantee, not going to be Ogre Kingdoms. Ogre Kingdoms is a big, flashy, super expensive race that will have almost no reused assets. It's going to be all monsters, and monsters are by far the most expensive unit in this game for Creative Assembly to create. So, and also, race packs. I should note the difference between race pack and campaign pack here, because that's a pretty big difference. Race packs are $10 and come with 2 legendary lords, maybe 3, and recycle a lot of assets. Campaign packs are $20, come with 4 legendary lords, and feature lots of new assets. Norska and Chaos Warriors were race packs. Wood Elves, Beastmen, Tomb Kings, and Vampire Ghosts were all campaign packs. Now, obviously, Beastmen and Wood Elves weren't great at launch, because part of the whole selling point was they also came with their own mini-campaigns, which Creative Assembly very quickly figured out is actually not that good. With Tomb Kings and Vampire Ghosts, what we got were massive race DLCs that were even better than the core races, and I expect that will be the trend that we see continue in Warhammer 3. So the Ogres are pretty obviously going to be the first campaign pack, and not the race pack. Chaos Dwarfs, I'm also inclined to say, are a campaign pack and not a race pack. They could definitely reuse more assets for Chaos Dwarfs than for Ogres, as a lot of the Chaos Dwarf army list is just Dwarfs or Greenskins. But there's also a lot of really big, flashy units with the Chaos Dwarfs, like Siege Giants, Kadai Fireborn, Kadai Destroyers, the various artillery pieces. And they have way more than 4 good Legendary Lord candidates, honestly. Especially since we're including Dreadfleet stuff like Aranus Assault Spite. There's a very real chance that they could go with Tordric Hackheart, who was a Chaos Dwarf captain from Dreadfleet. So that leaves Dogs of War. And I would consider Dogs of War to have equal likelihood with Nippon. Even though Nippon never got an army book, though they were a playable race in 3rd edition and I believe 2nd edition. So, Dogs of War and Nippon both have things going against them, good reasons why they wouldn't be the first race pack. Dogs of War was not really intended to be a playable race on the tabletop, if memory serves. It was intended to be a list of regiments of renown that you would purchase for use in other armies. You weren't supposed to buy the Dogs of War army book and then build a Dogs of War army. You were supposed to buy the Empire army book and then buy the Dogs of War army book, look in there and be like, oh, Ruglud's armored orcs. I'd like to have them. And you add Ruglud's armored orcs to your army. So, Dogs of War, because they're this very hodgepodge mix of Southern Realms, Empire, High Elves, Dark Elves, Bretonnia, Undead, Greenskins, Dwarfs, they would be visually very hodgepodge. Their aesthetic would just be all kinds of weird. Tactically, they'd be very strange to build around. But I don't discount that they could still happen. The only other thing I'd see going against them is that one of the most important units, one of the most iconic units for the Dogs of War are the Ogre Man-Eaters. But Crave Assembly might not want to have any Ogre units in the game prior to adding Ogre Kingdoms. On the opposite side, they could want to throw in Ogre Man-Eaters at launch as a preview of Ogre Kingdoms, a little taste ahead of time. Can't really predict Crave Assembly here. The case for Nippon is a bit different. So we already see with Cathay that Crave Assembly is looking into making entirely new army lists for races that never had army lists on the tabletop. And Nippon is in kind of a similar space to Cathay in that it's a Far East race that hasn't been... Actually, they're kind of opposite cases in a little bit. Because Cathay never got an army list, not even in the old editions. But we've got little snippets of lore over the years from the editions that came afterwards. The editions that effectively are the Warhammer we all recognize, 4th edition and forwards. Nippon has gotten almost no lore since they ceased being a playable army list. And the lore they did get when they were a playable army list was a fucking joke. But they did at least have a playable army list, and Cathay cannot come anywhere near that. Furthermore, I think Nippon could have a similar appeal to Cathay, in that Cathay is obviously supposed to be for everyone to play, because it's going to be fun having a Chinese aesthetic here in the Warhammer Fantasy, which we don't really have an equivalent for right now. But Cathay would obviously also appeal a lot to Chinese audiences, and the Chinese audience is rather famously huge. And I wonder if Nippon could have appeal for Japanese audiences, as Ghost of Tsushima was fairly recently a big success, and proved that Japanese audiences actually have an interest in Western portrayals of samurai, which Nippon would almost certainly center on. So, Dogs of War and Nippon, I can see both kind of working. I'd put them about equal chances. They both got factors going against them. And there's almost certainly no way it's going to be Ind or Koresh. I don't discount the possibility of getting Ind or Koresh down the line. I mean, after Cathay, anything's possible. But Ind or Koresh would require way more work than Nippon to make now, because Ind has even less lore than they do, and Ind never got an army list. Koresh has even less lore than Ind. They at least got miniatures, though. Koresh did get at least miniatures. I don't think they had rules attached to them, but they did get miniatures. So, that's going to be my guess. Almost certainly either Dogs of War or Nippon. I personally would prefer Nippon, but I would be happy with Dogs of War as well, because we'd finally get to see Araby and Albion and the Amazons and the Halflings and so on. Chaos Dwarfs could happen. I don't think it's likely. I think it's kind of improbable, but it could happen. Ogre Kingdoms, no. It's not happening with Ogre Kingdoms. Now, I wouldn't be sad if I were an Ogre Kingdoms fan. If I were... Well, I am kind of an Ogre Kingdoms fan. I'm really excited for Ogre Kingdoms. I think they're going to be a really fun, unique aesthetic and playstyle. But the Ogre Kingdoms are a shoo-in for the first campaign pack, and that is good, because that means they are going to have as much content completeness and as much uniqueness as the Tomb Kings and Vampire Coast did. And the Tomb Kings and Vampire Coast are probably the two most unique and fully feature-replete races in Total War Warhammer 2, other than maybe the Skaven. The Skaven are pretty beefy by now. 3 Lord packs does that for you. Alright, so folks, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you later.